Welcome to Season 3 of Coming Home to Ourselves, where we aim to bridge the gap between the sacred and modern day responsibilities, complex chronic illness, and life. I am your host, Denise Elysa, practitioner and teacher, and I aim to empower you to become your own self-healer and an embodied co-creator. I am not a medical professional, and nothing said in this podcast should be misconstrued as medical advice or replacement of such. To learn more about my philosophies or practices, visit deniseelysa.com. Hello, friends. Welcome and thank you for being here. As you know, if you've been with me for a while, 4 times a year, I hold a solo podcast episode to talk about the equinoxes and the solstices. So, of course, with this being June in the Northern Hemisphere, today we're going to talk all about the summer solstice. I also want to touch on a few other pieces, like a little bit of a personal update for my own health and how things are going there. And I want to touch on some other themes that I'm seeing showing up in the world right now and in other guests and people that I'm talking with in regards to safety when choosing a spiritual healer, a teacher, or some other practitioner. I know that these are some of the things that I have discussed in my very earliest episodes, but they seem to be coming back around to be explored and discussed again. And I'm seeing more and more and hearing more and more stories from others that are quite concerning and unsafe. And so I want to talk about that as well. So to start with the significance of the summer solstice. So like I said, I'm in the Northern Hemisphere. That means that in June, we hit our summer solstice. The summer solstice is the longest day of the year. What that means is that it is the day with the longest amount of daylight. The night is the shortest amount of night, the shortest amount of darkness. And after the summer solstice, when light hits its peak, we start to experience slowly getting shorter and shorter days, slowly getting more and more darkness. And now what's really interesting about this is that at least where I live on the coast of British Columbia near Vancouver, we experience our summer through July and August. That tends to be like our hottest months. It's also when the school system takes their summer holidays. And so that is where societally, or through our standard calendar now, we consider the summer to be. But really, the light has been building since the winter solstice in December. It has slowly been getting longer and longer, more and more daylight. And now we will shift into darker days. So energetically, what I like to look at the summer solstice is what is coming to a peak in your life. This could be seeds that you planted at the spring equinox. This could go all the way back to last summer when the days became darker then. Things that started to be set in motion. Can also be things that were building and growing beneath the surface through winter in the darkest times that are now fully coming into the light. So something that may have been hidden before, but is now fully entering the light. So just reflect on that for a moment for yourself. If you take a moment to tune in with your body, to find your footing, feel your feet on the ground or your body on the surface beneath you. Take that moment to center yourself and then ask yourself, what is coming to peak in my own life right now? What is it that is asking for me to see it more fully, to see it more clearly? What is coming into my presence in a new or different way where it feels like something that may have been hidden before is now being fully shone a light on? And just allow yourself to sit with that with curiosity and to explore and be with whatever comes up for you within that practice, because there's so much wisdom in tuning into this cyclical nature within ourselves and to tuning into the energies that are happening around us. We each have these inner seasons as well as the outer seasons. So what I'm saying is that you're not always going to feel internally like it matches the outside. But as you begin to practice connecting with these outer markers, right? These shifts that are happening in nature around us, we can then slowly become more attuned to those cyclical shifts that are happening within us. So we may be in an inner autumn right now. We may be in an inner winter or an inner spring, but tuning into those inner seasons becomes much easier, much more natural as we develop this consistent practice of connecting with the seasons happening around us and the shifts that are happening around us. We have all of these beautiful cues outside of ourselves to help us connect with those shifts that are happening in nature. And through that, that can really invite us to reflect inwards as well. So we think of summer as this time to like speed up and to get out there and to be seen and to be, lots of us are doing a lot more through the summer months. And I'm not going to tell you not to do a lot more throughout the summer months. I do think that that is often supported during this time, but we can't be in full bloom all year round. So what we want to do is connect inward and ask ourselves, have I been expecting this inner spring summer from myself all year? When was the last time that I rested? And with this summer being the peak of light, we also want to start to begin to slowly turn inwards a little bit, this preparation for fall and winter. It doesn't have to happen right away. We have a whole season ahead of us to do this. So slowly over the summer months, what I would invite you to do is to tune inward and to ask yourself, is the energy that I am expending serving me? Is the output that I am working so hard towards serving me or the people in my life, or the loved ones that I have? Is it serving my household, my family, my community? Is it creating something that is going to have a sturdy and strong foundation to last me through the autumn and winter? We don't want to spend our summer just turning our wheels just because we feel like it's time to be out there, okay? It is a beautiful time to get out, to enjoy nature, to connect with other people, and to allow ourselves to be seen. Because again, we are talking about the light, right? Anytime we're talking about the light, we're talking about bringing up what has previously been hidden. We're talking about shining a light on things that we may not have seen before. And we're also talking about allowing ourselves to be seen in new and different ways as well. So how is it that you have been allowing yourself to be seen, or have you? And if you have you been allowing yourself to be seen in a way that feels fully authentic and true to you? Or have you been trying to show up in a way that, maybe doesn't align with who you actually are? Maybe it's more aligned with who you think you should be or who you think you need to be in order to be accepted, in order to be loved, or something more aligned with like societal conditioning, that sort of thing, instead of who you authentically are at your core. Just sit with that for a moment. What would it mean for you to allow yourself to be fully, authentically seen for who you truly are? Not who you think you should be, not who you were taught that you needed to be in order to be accepted or safe or loved, but for who you authentically are. If you want to go deeper into these types of practices that really support you in utilizing the current energy to connect inward with yourself and to offer that healing back to yourself and to connect with some of that intuitive knowing within you, then join a ceremony, right? There are tons of summer solstice celebrations that you can join. I have one, but there are so many others. So the key is really to find the one that aligns for you. Within mine, it's called the Seasonal Pause Summer Solstice. So the Seasonal Pause is my series of equinox and solstice events. They are quarterly events and they happen live online. They used to be in person. They're not anymore. And what we do is we gather in circle and community and this ceremonial practice to connect inward and outward with nature around us. So we are connecting with the summer solstice energies in the ways that they are really set up to support us in connecting with ourselves and with them. And we connect with each other. And we utilize this energy and this circle to really come home to ourselves in new ways. We have meditation, we have somatic practices, we have oracle card reading, we have discussion, questions, answers, and typically we offer like a manifestation type practice as well. I love to work with manifesting at the summer solstice because the summer solstice is when in nature, most things are beginning to bloom if they haven't already, right? So we are experiencing full bloom outside of ourselves, and we can really start to create the space for our previous manifestations to land and to become in full bloom in our lives. It's also this checkpoint, this internal checkpoint for what seeds did we plant at the spring equinox? And have we been tending to them? Have we been acting in alignment with them in ways that creates the space and the circumstances for them to be allowed to land? How is our nervous system? If you've taken my embodied manifesting foundations course or workshop, you will already have a really good understanding that if our nervous systems do not have the capacity to hold what it is that we are calling in, then even if we can energetically get that manifestation to land, we won't be able to sustain it. We won't be able to hold it long term. So this checkpoint of the summer solstice gives us this opportunity to really reflect back on what is it that we have been trying to call in? What is it that we would really support us in our lives right now? And have we been tending to that? Have we been working internally, externally in the ways that would create the space and the capacity and the environment for those manifestations to land? When we get to the autumn equinox, that is like the harvest season, right? The plants in nature are kind of coming to an end. The last of them are being harvested. Things are being gathered for storage so that they can last us the winter, so that it can sustain us through those colder and darker months. So the summer solstice is this beautiful opportunity to pause, to connect inward, to reflect back on seeds we may have planted before, to check in with ourselves. Is those seeds still in alignment with what we need, with where we're going? Which ones of them have already landed, and have we even noticed that? Have we even noticed how far we have come? How much things have changed? How much things have shifted? And what is it that we still need? What is it that we still need to call in, or that is maybe a larger manifestation that hasn't landed yet? And in that situation, what do we need to do now? What do we need to shift our focus towards so that we can support ourselves in having that land in the next few months, or to be working towards it for even next year if it's quite a bit of a larger process. So this invitation to slow down in the peak of light in the summer is a little bit countercultural, right? As I mentioned before, most people are starting to go out, they're starting to do a lot more, socialize more, connect with people more. The invitation to slow down is not about coming to a halt, right? It's not about stopping. It's about taking an inventory, an honest inventory within ourselves about where are we genuinely at this time? What do we need in order to sustain us for the next year? This is a point where you can really utilize the energy of the sun and the energy of the connection and the love and the openness that surrounds you, that many people this time of year are experiencing and open to. And when we do that, we want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that cultivates this sustainability, this security, and this strong, sturdy foundation for the darker months when they come. Okay. We don't want to, there's nothing wrong with connecting with people who you're only going to connect with in the summer. Lots of us have people in our lives who we only connect with certain times of year, certain sports seasons, however that might show up for you. But we want to also ensure that we are setting aside that time and that space and that capacity for the people in our lives who are those sturdy foundational pillars, so that the summer months don't come and go and now we're in the dark again. And those people who would have been these strong pillars in our lives have just kind of like fallen by the wayside because we didn't take the time to check in with ourselves and our priorities and what really aligns for us and our lives at this time. Being able to connect with that in an authentic way that really serves and supports you does require a little bit of a connection to your own nervous system, right? So when was the last time that you actually tuned in to check in, like with your nervous system, how it's going, with your body, reconnected with your body? That's another thing that tends to get quite bypassed during the summer months in our society is our connections with our body, because we just want to go, go, go. We want to be outside, we want to be socializing, and we want to be like fitting the mold, right? We want to be fitting in. And when we want to fit in, we tend to override our own body's cues. We tend to disassociate and disconnect from ourselves in the way that allows us to show up how we think we have to show up. That seems to be a big theme coming through today. For those of you who don't know, I don't really prep a whole lot for these podcast recordings. I like to really see what's alive in the energy in the moment and what gets channeled through me. I definitely don't have a script. I might have a couple, say 5-point form notes to make sure that I don't miss anything big. But besides that, I'm really just paying attention to the consistent themes that are flowing through. I do a quick meditation process before hitting record to make sure that I am tuning into the energetics with clarity and ease, and in a way that serves the highest and best of everyone involved, the highest and best of those listening, and the collective that follows me. So this theme of self-abandonment really is showing up quite strongly, where we have a tendency to abandon ourselves in order to fit in order to fit the mold. When we do that, we create this disconnection from ourselves and from our bodies. And when that happens, it can be really difficult to discern what is true for us, to discern what feels authentic and right and aligned. And it really can contribute to dis-ease and disharmony in the body because we begin to disconnect in ways that shoves down any symptoms or any messages that our body might be trying to communicate with us at the time. And that makes it really difficult for us to know what our bodies need. So again, coming back to intuitive energy healing, somatic therapy, somatic healing, somatic inquiry work, anything that reconnects you to yourself, helps you feel your feet beneath you, helps you feel the chair beneath you, helps you reconnect with the idea that you have a body at all. How many of us are just like living in our heads? Our energy is heavily up in the upper half of our body or even in our head or above our head. And it's hard for us to connect with sensation at all. When was the last time that you noticed you had to pee, but delayed going to the bathroom? Just put it off, just ignored the sensation. Or you noticed that you were thirsty and you thought, well, I'll just finish this task first, and then got 7 emails later before you actually got up and got a drink, right? So many of us are so conditioned to ignore our body's cues, to completely disconnect from that interoception. When we disconnect from that interoception, we tend to disconnect from sensation, from symptoms, from the messages that our bodies have for us. And this can also make it difficult to connect back in with our intuition and with that deep inner knowing. The summer period can be quite activating, right? That's what makes us want to go out and connect and do things. And that's a beautiful and potent energy that I think it's really positive to work with in the ways that serve you, in the ways that offer healing to you. But we also want to make sure that we are taking that time for integration. If we are just in this state of production, but we never come back to that integration, then the healing work that we're doing doesn't have a chance to become embodied, which means that we either have to do it again, we have to repeat the same healing, or we end up acting out of alignment with what we already know and what we've already learned because it's not coming naturally yet. It hasn't been integrated yet. That integration work is such a key piece of any type of healing, whether it's intuitive energy healing, somatic therapy, parts work, whatever you may be doing. That time and that space for integration makes such a massive difference. And it's a piece that so many people try to bypass because everybody wants to just get to the next step, right? And many of us don't feel safe in that pause. We don't feel safe if we aren't actively doing something towards taking that next step. We feel like we have to be productive in order to be worthy. And we feel like we have to be working towards something in order to get to that next layer. What a lot of people miss in that process is that if we don't offer ourselves that time and that process and that physiological processing for integration to happen, then we can't get to the next step, no matter how hard we push or how hard we try. I want to talk a little bit about my own health and give you a little bit of an update, just because this is my opportunity to do it in this solo episode, and because I think it's important to be transparent with you about where I was and where I am now and, some of the processes that it took to get there. So when I look back on a year ago, June 2025 was the last time that I was still in a wheelchair for outings. So I was just getting to the point of being able to take some small outings without a wheelchair, but I still required a wheelchair for anything larger or anything longer. Like if there was a longer walk involved, I definitely needed a wheelchair. By July, I was doing a little bit of paddleboarding again, which was absolutely the best feeling ever. I have not used the wheelchair. I haven't needed the wheelchair since last June. So that's another massive, massive accomplishment that was not expected by my doctors. I was advised that I would need a wheelchair likely for the rest of my life. I was advised that I would likely be homebound or some degree of bedridden for most of my life. For those of you who remember or don't remember, back in 2023, I had become completely bedridden, unable to eat or speak. So that is a massive, massive amount of healing that was unexpected by the medical system, unexpected by my doctors. As I said, I was advised that I would need to be in a wheelchair for probably the rest of my life. And I'm here, being able to offer this work out to other people who are living with those same illnesses that I was. And, I have my one-on-one practice where that's where we go really deep. That's where I can take people into their own nervous systems, into the somatic inquiry work, and really go deeper into those layers of parts work and trauma and symptoms as messengers, and really track those somatically to offer that physiological healing, right? When we have a stressful event or a traumatic event where we don't have the space, the capacity, or the support to be able to allow that stress response or survival energy to physiologically process in our system, then it gets stored in there somewhere. And eventually that still has to process and come out, right? So that has been a massive piece of my own healing. It was a huge, huge piece in me being able to get off of all of my mast cell activation syndrome medication and come into a good place with that. And it's also something that I offer to my guests in one-on-one sessions. I also have the Embodied Soul with Denise Elysa community app. This is where we meet in groups. We offer over $1,000 worth of on-demand content and resources, guided meditations, workshops, ceremonies. We have 2 to 3 live events per month, and that is also where the seasonal pause is hosted. So members of the Embodied Soul community gain free access to all of these monthly events, as well as the seasonal pause series. Everything goes back into there as replays for the people who cannot make it live. And there's lots of other perks like live guest speakers where members get to, bring questions to our guest experts and have these communications with them, chat with each other in the chat room. You can ask questions on the message board within the app, and I answer back. So I'm in there every day offering guidance and support. This is also where some of you will have noticed that my regular podcast episodes have taken a little bit of a slight shift. So what I'm doing now is my live guest experts are coming into my Embodied Soul with Denise Elysa community. They are offering these conversations live to my members. My members are able to ask questions. They can send them in ahead of time. They can ask them live during the recording, whatever they need to do. And then that full extended deep dive, usually 1.5 to 2 hours long, goes into the community as a full replay. That episode then gets edited down into a version to go out onto the podcast, something shorter, something easier to listen to. It doesn't go as deep. None of the guided practices are in there. And that comes out onto the podcast usually about 4 to 6 months later after the recording. So you'll have noticed some of those shifts starting to take place on the Coming Home to Ourselves with Denise Elysa podcast already. And this is my little update for you that is how it is going to be working moving forward. So if you ever have a guest that you want to be able to ask questions to, just join the community just for that month that we're recording in if you want. There's no pressure to stay, right? But you can join the community, you can come live, and you can send those questions in advance as well. And then I also have the work that I do for the BC Center for Long COVID, Myalgic Encephalomyelitis, and Fibromyalgia, the BCCLMF. I hope I said all of that right. So that's an internal medicine clinic here in Vancouver, BC. And I have been contracted to them since 2024 to, I guess it was like spring of 2024 that I started with them to offer group meditation and energy healing to their patients living with complex chronic illness. So this work, these illnesses, symptoms as messengers, working with the nervous system on these deeper layers has really become not only what has created such massive and unexpected healing in my own body, in my own life, but it is also my life's work, basically, that I am now able to offer out to other people. For those of you who don't know, I took a little bit of a hiatus from the clinic last year while I continued the rest of my work so that I could create a little bit of space for myself to do my somatic inquiry facilitator training. So that training encompassed somatic inquiry, somatic parts work, some polyvagal theory, lots of nervous system education, and it has blended so incredibly well and powerfully, potently with the intuitive energy healing and past life regression work that I was already offering, the ceremonial work that I was already offering. So the way that this work has really combined and integrated into my own life, but also these practices kind of have become blended together, has been just such a wild journey for my own healing and my own body, but such a significant blessing as well. For those of you who don't know, I was on the highest therapeutic dosages of different antihistamines for mast cell activation syndrome, and I was still going into anaphylaxis. I couldn't go into a public space because the fragrance would make my throat start to close, my tongue start to swell, my lips tingle. I would get air hunger and breathlessness. I would feel really disoriented, and it would be followed by like digestive issues and other things like that. This situation became very, very scary and had a lot of ER visits that, you know, if you're in the chronic illness world, you know already what it's like to have to go to the ER. It's not an enjoyable experience when you're living with these illnesses that are so poorly understood. And so fast forward to spring of 2026, and I was able to slowly and safely titrate off of all of my antihistamines. So I went from 8 pills a day to manage my mast cell activation syndrome down to none. And there was a significant somatic and energy healing process that went into that. So check out my blog post on this, or I even have a full free lesson on this inside of the Embodied Soul with Denise Elysa community. You can join under the free membership, and then you can get access to this full lesson along with like a write-up, you know, lots of written content, and then also a video, full-length hour-long video for you. But basically what I'm saying is I want to remind you that I'm not a medical doctor and that this is not medical advice. I try to be very mindful of how I speak about medications and illnesses and that intersection, where that intersects with my work. However, this is just my own personal story. And I was able to slowly and safely titrate down from 8 pills a day to 0, when previously, even just 6 months before this, I was still going into anaphylaxis. So every time that I slowly titrated down the medication, it would be followed with a significant period of somatic healing and intuitive energy healing work. Those sensations that the medication was repressing in my system still needed to come up and through to be experienced somatically so that I could explore what was underneath them, right? So again, go check out the free lesson for like a deeper version of this. But what I'm trying to say is that what appears to be miraculous on the outside really has a lot more that goes into it, but it is possible for anyone, in my opinion. Anyone who is ready and dedicated to doing this work for themselves and who has the right supports to do it. I'm not saying that intuitive energy healing and somatic healing are going to completely cure somebody of illness or disease, but we have the power. We have so much more power than we think we do. So much more power than we think we do. That leads me right into one of the things that I wanted to share around safety and intuitive discernment in regards to working with a practitioner and how to choose a practitioner. I have always felt very strongly that it's important for people to do their own research, to come and find a practitioner who feels very intuitively aligned for them. And sometimes that means asking a lot of questions. Sometimes that means having a discussion with the practitioner in advance. Sometimes it means like checking out their website, their YouTube, their blog posts, like whatever it may be, to try to get a sense of who this practitioner is and what they do. I actually, before I chose one of my last teachers, I joined his community, his online community, for months before deciding whether or not I was going to work with him. Because that was a very, very good way for me to get a clear sense of who he was. There was posts inside of the group. There was a lot of practices and offerings and workshops and guided practices, things like that inside of the community for me to access. But there was also live events that I could attend where I could get to know him, witness his responses, witness his way of practicing, and experience it for myself. I got to not only ask him questions on my own in these live sessions, but I got to witness how he responded to other people as well. And that was probably one of the best, most effective ways for me to really get a sense of who he was and whether or not his work was going to align for me, and if I felt like he was a safe, high integrity practitioner for me. One of the things that we see a lot in the spiritual and healing spaces is this spiritual bypassing. So anytime a practitioner, and this is not all practitioners, right? So please don't take this the wrong way. There are many, many high integrity, good, authentic, potent practitioners for you to choose from. And there's also a reason that this industry has such a bad rep for some people. You deserve to be able to feel into a sense of safety with the person who you want to work with. You deserve to be able to ask them questions and to get to know them before or during your work together so that you can use your own intuitive discernment to know what is truly aligned for you at any given time. I have heard so many traumatic stories about people who went to healers who they trusted, who ended up turning around on them and using spiritual bypassing and these concepts, like whenever they were questioned, saying things like, "You're projecting your negative energy on me," to completely bypass any sense of self-responsibility or any responsibility for the way that they were behaving or the way that they were showing up and interacting in sessions. Healers are people too. So we are flawed. We are not perfect. Most of us are doing the best that we can with the information and the education and the level of embodiment that we have. But if somebody has gone through most of their practices using spiritual bypassing techniques, they won't have properly embodied this work. If they have not fully embodied this work themselves, they cannot effectively or safely offer it out to other people. We can only go as deep with other people as we have gone within ourselves. So again, do your research, use your intuitive discernment, don't be afraid to ask questions. If the person who you're curious about has a community or a way of, connecting with them in a more accessible or financially accessible way, then do that, right? Get a feel for them, feel them out. Don't feel like there is this power dynamic where they're the only one who gets to ask questions or to question things. You have that right as well. Most of us as healers who are operating in a high integrity way, in an authentic and embodied way, most of us are fairly transparent that we are still doing this work ourselves. There is no finish line. There is no clear end goal. Like, when I get to this point, I will be totally healed and fully embodied, and there will be no more work to be done, right? This is part of being human. We are still in this work ourselves, and there's nothing wrong with that. I see multiple other practitioners for their specialties, some of whom do the same work as me, but sometimes I just need somebody else to hold me through it, somebody else to guide me, someone else's nervous system to co-regulate from when we're going into those really, really deep and sticky traumatic layers, right? So there's nothing wrong with that. I actually think that that's incredibly important and is one of the things that I would be questioning in somebody else if I was to begin to work with them. This wellness space is massive and it's largely unregulated. So your intuitive discernment is a skill that is required in order to move through it safely and in alignment for you. One of the things that I have witnessed and heard many stories around is practitioners who don't teach their guests intuitive discernment and don't empower them to be able to discern these things on their own, because that keeps them reliant on that practitioner. And it also creates this dynamic where the practitioner can kind of have this sense of, I'm always right, because the guest doesn't have that intuitive discernment or that ability to connect with their own intuition in a way that would guide them with clarity and to help them understand what is true and what is not. So make sure that whoever you're working with is empowering you. You shouldn't be reliant on a practitioner forever. I mean, I choose to continue with my practitioners probably forever until they no longer serve me, until their work can no longer meet me where I'm at. But I receive so much value and so much benefit from working with other practitioners, especially ones who are highly skilled in similar work as me and who have that integrity and that embodiment. But I'm not reliant on them. If I could no longer see them, I would be able to do a lot of this myself. I do a lot of this myself on a regular, I would say daily, almost daily basis. But there are people out there who either do not have the skills or do not have the willingness to teach their guests this intuitive discernment or how to connect with this within themselves. And like I said, that discernment, it really is a necessity when you're navigating such a large pool of practitioners in an unregulated situation, where unregulated industry, where you don't have necessarily a really good way of knowing who they are or what's right for you through any other means than your own intuition. Some of the green flags when finding a practitioner are finding people who are willing to go at your pace, who are willing to slow you down if they feel like you're trying to go quicker than what your body or your nervous system can hold and can integrate, when they are not pushing you past your window of tolerance, but also when they're picking up on you wanting to push past your window of tolerance because maybe you're in that space where you are trying to push past to your next layer of healing before the last one is fully integrated. Having a practitioner call that out and say, hey, I think that we need to slow this down a bit for your safety and for the safety of this work and the effectiveness of this work. That's a green flag, right? You want a practitioner who is transparent about their training, their limitations, their scope of practice, somebody who understands what their own boundaries are and what the boundaries and limitations of their work is, so that they can offer that in a way that is safe, and then they can refer you out to the people who offer something else if you need to go in a different direction than what they can take you in. Somebody who welcomes questions and who doesn't position themselves as the sole authority on your healing. Nobody is a higher expert in you and your body than you. Some of the red flags that I often see or hear about in other healers are, like I mentioned earlier, not empowering you in connecting with yourself and being able to take some of these practices home with you so that you can do some of this stuff for yourself and you're not reliant on a practitioner every time something dysregulates you or every time a trigger arises in your system. So much of this work is done in between sessions. So in the session, you should be able to be learning and embodying some of these skills so that between sessions, when triggers arise, you have those tools in your toolbox to actually work with what is alive in your system in that moment. Because that is where some massive shifts and healing can really take place. And you can't control the timing of when those triggers arise. Some other red flags I have noticed are people who put all of like this ideology that if you're sick, it's your fault. That if you have chronic fatigue syndrome or myalgic encephalomyelitis or mast cell activation syndrome or Lyme disease or any of these illnesses, that this was something that was your karma or that you chose or is because you are just not motivated enough to be well, right? There are so many layers to people becoming that sick. And when people do reach that stage of becoming that sick, there are usually multiple modalities that are required to bring them back into a state of wholeness and in a state of balance. So if practitioners are telling you that medication is a bad thing, that medicating your symptoms is never needed, or that medication is always repressing other symptoms, these are things that you want to consider what they're saying and how they're saying it, and if that really aligns for you. I do believe that sometimes medication is repressing other symptoms and that sometimes we need to be exploring those symptoms in order to heal. However, I also believe that we cannot access that felt sense of safety required to do that work if we are so stuck in these like dangerous symptoms or really scary symptoms. So there are a lot of situations where medication is a very useful tool or sometimes required in order to take these steps. If somebody is going into anaphylaxis, I am never, ever going to tell them that medication should not be considered. If the possibility of death is on the table and there is a medication that can help with that and can keep you safe, your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual safety always, always, always has to come first. And the rest can come later. There is so much of this work that can be done while somebody is on medication in conjunction with their medical providers. We can work with the system to develop that safety, to connect with that sense of safety. And from there, the body and the nervous system and our intuitions will lead us to what those next steps are and to where this needs to go. So there's no reason, unless you have a reason outside of this, to avoid working with a medical practitioner in conjunction with your intuitive energy healer or your somatic practitioner. And if you are working with somebody and you are experiencing life-threatening symptoms, or even if they're not life-threatening, but they're symptoms that are really impacting your day-to-day life and your function and your overall quality of life, and your medical provider has a medication that can help with that, then that is often something that should be discussed and should be considered. We should not write things off in this ideology that energy healing and somatic healing is going to remove all of those symptoms immediately. This is a process that needs to be done very slowly, that needs to be done very safely, and all of these different pieces are able to work in conjunction with each other. So I am just really tired of hearing different practitioners say that things like mast cell activation syndrome doesn't exist and that medication is not ever needed, when meanwhile we have people going into anaphylaxis. Simultaneously, I am not saying that medication is always the answer, and I'm not saying that medication doesn't repress symptoms or that it will get to the root cause. But what I am saying is that there is space for these different healing practices to work in conjunction with modern medicine in whatever way most serves you. And that is up to you. That is up to your practitioner to work with you on that. That is up to your medical provider to work with you on that. And that is up to you to make the decisions that feel truly right and like the best and most safe, most effective path forward for you. Fast is not always the answer. It is okay to use medication to get to the place where you can access a felt sense of safety in your body, and then to do this work really slowly in the way that is effective and the way that is safe and the way that is most likely to actually stick and to become embodied. One of the other red flags that I have been seeing recently is practitioners and the way that they speak about different neurotypes. So I don't think I'm going to dive super deep into this one, but the reason I'm mentioning it is because I'm seeing people who are feeling or being made to feel like they are less than because of being a different neurotype, maybe being neurodivergent, autistic, ADHD, or some other type of neurodivergence. And there are many different lenses that different practitioners see this through. Some practitioners see neurodivergence as a natural evolutionary process and something that is actually benefiting humanity and the planet. And other people see neurodivergence as like it's something that they need to fix through emotional repression work or through energetic work, through ancestral work, whatever it may be. And I'm not a big fan of that. I don't believe that neurodivergence is something that we need to fix. If I had to categorize myself in this way, which I don't love to do, I would say that I lean more towards the side that thinks that that's a little bit more evolutionary, that there are incredible skills and benefits that having neurodivergent people on this planet bring to humanity and to this planet and to this world, the sensitivity and the heightened awareness that many neurodivergent people have is a gift. And I also recognize that some of the symptoms of being neurodivergent in the current society that we live in the structures that we live in, can bring significant challenges to that neurodivergent person, to the person raising the neurodivergent people or interacting with them. But I believe that that has less to do with being neurodivergent itself and more to do with the structures, the societal conditioning, the way that we live in society at this time. So I am far from saying that it is easy to be neurodivergent. I know that there can be incredible challenges that come with that. I also know that through somatic healing, through energy work, through ancestral lineage work, we can begin to minimize some of those symptoms and some of those challenges. We can work with sensation. We can reconnect to interoception. We can use proprioception to support the nervous system and to bring those cues back into the body. And through doing that, and through aligning with our authentic self and through recognizing what our needs are and what accommodations we need, we can actually begin to create and build a life that supports us instead of a life and an environment that is so challenging for us every single day. But I don't believe that being neurodivergent is something that needs to be fixed. And I believe that the narrative that some spiritual healers, teachers, meditation teachers, guides, ancestral healing people have taken on in regards to neurodivergence being something that needs to be fixed and being something that can be healed or removed through this work is dehumanizing. So I understand that that is a massively nuanced subject that, I could go into so much greater depth and detail on if I was very careful about how I worded it. But I'm not going to spend that time today. If anybody else has specific questions about neurodivergence or chronic illness or any of these things that I've talked about in relation to finding a healer that actually will support you and will align with your values and with what it is that you're needing, then you're always welcome to email me through my website, the contact form on my website. Or if you're in the Embodied Soul with Denise Elysa community, then of course, please, I welcome you dropping all of your questions there. Now, because it is summer solstice, coming full circle back around to the intention of this episode today, I am going to do a quick card reading. I won't do a really long one because I go deeper in the seasonal pause summer solstice ceremony, but I do really love bringing in a little bit of a card reading for each of these equinox and solstice podcast episodes. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. As you know, if you've been listening to these podcast episodes for a while, I tend to cut out the sections where I am, shuffling the cards, clearing the cards, things like that. So it's just a little bit easier to listen to that way. But just know that I am channeling these messages for the highest and best of everyone involved and the highest and best of the collective listening today. So we are receiving cards of love and harvest and abundance. This is a reminder to really tune in to yourself, tune in to those seeds that you planted back in the spring and anything that may have been growing in the darkness of winter, and to check in on them. How are they doing? What do they need from you? Are there manifestations that are already landing in your life, that are already coming to fruition? And if there are, have you taken the time to really notice them and to receive them and to feel that gratitude? I love the phrase, thank you more, please, right? Whenever a manifestation lands for me, thank you more, please. More of this, bring me more joy, bring me more abundance, bring me more love. But thank you. And also a thank you to my own system, my own nervous system, for having the capacity to hold this thing that has landed, that is coming into my life. I have a few blog posts on that. If you want to go a little bit deeper, you can check out the embodied manifestation blog post. I think it's called Have You Manifested Anything Before? And I also have a blog post on the summer solstice for you to dive a little bit deeper as well. This is a time of transition, not only in nature, but also within your inner self and within your inner cyclical nature. So really allowing yourself to pause, not for a long time, but just for long enough to really acknowledge and notice that transition and to notice what that transition is asking of you. What is this shift asking of your way of being, of your body, of your mind, of your nervous system? What practices will support you? What is it that you really need to be taking into consideration and focusing on as you move through this season? If you are able to really connect with that light within you during this season, this light that is at its peak, you can take that connection that you build, that relationship that you build with this light within you in a way that will carry you through the darker months. So when we come to the peak of winter, we need to have been really relying on that inner light within us, not only to guide us, but to keep us connected, to keep us lit up inside when nature around us is quite a bit darker. So really cultivating that energy now in the summer will help carry you through the months to come. When we do enter the winter months, because as I mentioned, the days are going to slowly start to get darker now, we enter this little bit of a void state through the darker months. And what I mean by that is that it's this time where it appears on the surface that not very much is growing. But what's actually happening is this deep integration and recalibration in our lives and in our systems. And a lot is growing and developing beneath the surface, beneath the darkness where we cannot see it at that time. But when we come back into the summer months, then we start to see the fruits of that labor. We start to see things in full bloom, and that light begins to shine on what was previously hidden. When we really embrace the season that we are in, it helps carry us through the next ones. It helps remind us that winter will come again, sun will come again, the summer will come again. When that light is beginning to wane, we have that resourced connection to the light within ourselves, and we have that sense of knowing and that safety and that embodied experience that even when things become dark and it feels like we are in the void and it feels like we might never come out, we know that the sun is going to return. And we know that we have that light within us to hold us until we get there. This is a time to really connect with your accomplishments. Really take that inner inventory of how far you have come. It's so important to take that moment to pause and to really acknowledge within ourselves the hurdles we've overcome, the shifts we've created for ourselves, the change that we have created. It is so programmed into so many of us to just keep moving on to the next thing. We hit an accomplishment and we barely acknowledge it. We just go on to the next, right? We finish some big job or some big task, or we reach some milestone. And before we have even connected with this concept that we survived, that we got there, that we accomplished that goal, we're already into what's next, and then grinding and working towards this next accomplishment. So we never feel accomplished when we are in that cycle. So this summer months, when everything around you is in full bloom, taking that time to see within yourself and to really allow yourself to see within you what is in full bloom for you. What has been accomplished? What have you created within your own life? So much of my health and my recovery has been created by me. I have had many, many specialists tell me that there's nothing more they can do for me, that they just have no answers, that science just has not caught up with the illnesses that I live with, or with my body, what I'm experiencing, or how to recover, that there are no medications for these diseases, that, that there's just nothing else that they can do. So much of my recovery has been because of the choices that I have made, the work that I have done, the inner processing that I have dedicated myself to. And the world around us doesn't always see that. A lot of the world around me, not all of it, but a lot, only sees how far I still have to go. They see the limitations that I still live with, the challenges that I still have, and they never stop to acknowledge or to notice that no medical doctor expected me to ever reach where I am. So the narrative that some of the people in my life share with me, or that I can sense kind of seeping off of them in different dynamics, is this idea that I haven't done enough. There's no awareness for the fact that I have done so much, that I have gotten to where I am. That 95% of that, I mean, it's a hard thing to quantify exactly, but such a massive percentage of that has been done by me, for me, in my neuroplasticity work, in my somatic work, in my energy healing work, my meditation, my mind-body connection, the creating a felt sense of safety in my body that at one point had no access to a felt sense of safety, the healing and reconnection and recovery of my nervous system, which developed from a very young age, co-regulating to a dysregulated nervous system. That's a whole other thing that I could go on and on about, because that's the situation for so many of us. And the reason that I'm sharing this on a personal level is because I know that that story is so similar for so many of you. So it's really important to be able to acknowledge our own accomplishments. Something that my counselor says to me regularly, one of my somatic counselors, is, when did you know you survived that? And because I'm well practiced, I typically know that I have survived it kind of when I have survived it. But what's interesting is, when did we know that not only we survived, but that we took our power back? When did we know that our recovery was in our own hands, and then took the action accordingly, found the resources ourselves, found the teachers ourselves, found the practitioners ourselves? For myself, I had to pay out of pocket for massive amounts of my practitioner work to get me to where I am. And I am privileged to be able to somewhat do that. And I know that many aren't. But there are so many different ways to take your power back and to begin your own healing, whatever that looks like for you. Not every one of you listening is going to be living with complex chronic diseases. So take this message and apply it to what you are navigating, because every single one of us is navigating something. As we acknowledge within ourselves these accomplishments and how far we have come, and we really allow ourselves to take that in and to feel it, we open ourselves up to greater receptivity. This sense of being able to receive more and more of the abundance and the healing that we deserve. We connect with that inherent sense of self-worth, that worthiness within us that helps draw in and attract and open us to receiving and holding that which is in greater alignment for us. So I will go deeper into a card reading, somatic practices, meditations, and the energetics and energy healing for summer solstice inside of the seasonal pause summer solstice ceremony. So I hope to see you there. It is free for all Embodied Soul with Denise Elysa members, but pre-registration is required. So please don't forget to register. I can't wait to see you there. Thank you so much for being here. I really hope this served. As always, I am trusting you to take what resonates with you and leave the rest behind. Full extended versions of many of my episodes for Season 3 can be found in the Embodied Soul with Denise Elysa community app. If you'd like to join our recordings live and have the opportunity to send in questions in advance, that's the place to do it. If my podcast resonates with you, it would mean the world to me if you'd leave me a rating, review, positive comments, or likes, as those are so important on these platforms, and be sure to hit subscribe. If you'd like to dive deeper than what these platforms can provide, I invite you to explore my Embodied Soul with Denise Elysa community app, a virtual sanctuary where you can connect more deeply with yourself and others in a supportive environment while developing the tools to awaken your own self-healer. You are the medicine.